She whispered, "I love you," in my ear the same morning I ate cereal for breakfast because we couldn't afford milk. She held my hand through 3 years of eating ramen noodles 5 nights a week. She kissed me goodnight in our one-bedroom apartment where the neighbors' arguments were our nightly entertainment. But the day my bank account hit 7 figures, she handed me divorce papers with the same hands that used to trace my face and promise me forever. My name is Michael, and I'm about to tell you the most twisted, calculated, and ultimately satisfying revenge story you'll ever hear. If you think you know betrayal, if you think you've seen greed, if you think you understand how low someone can go when money is involved, then buckle up, because what happened to me will shatter every assumption you have about love, loyalty, and human nature. Before we dive into this psychological thriller disguised as a love story, hit that like button right now, because I guarantee you've never heard anything like what I'm about to share. And trust me, you're going to want to remember every single detail of how this unfolds. Picture this. It's 2:30 in the morning. I'm sitting on the floor of our apartment surrounded by empty coffee cups and crumpled papers. My laptop screen is the only light in the room, and I've just cracked the code that's going to change everything. 3 years of 18-hour days, 3 years of working 3 jobs just to keep the lights on, 3 years of Sarah watching me pour every ounce of my soul into building something from absolutely nothing. I turned to wake her up, to share this moment of breakthrough with the woman I thought was my partner in this crazy journey, but she just rolls over and mumbles something about me working too much. I should have known right then that she wasn't building this dream with me. She was just waiting for it to pay off. Let me take you back to where this nightmare began, disguised as a fairy tale. 10 years ago, I was 25 years old, working the morning shift at a warehouse where my job was to lift boxes that weighed more than my monthly rent payment. My hands were permanently stained with industrial grease, my back felt like it belonged to a man twice my age, and my clothes smelled like a combination of motor oil and broken dreams. But I had something that kept me going through the exhaustion and the hopelessness. I had Sarah. Sarah Martinez was everything I thought I wanted in a partner. She had this laugh that could make you forget you were broke, this smile that made our cramped apartment feel like a palace, and this way of looking at me like I was already the success she knew I could become. We met at a coffee shop where she worked part-time, serving overpriced lattes to people who spent more on their morning caffeine than we spent on groceries all week. I was there because it was the only place with free Wi-Fi where I could work on my business plan without getting kicked out. She would bring me refills without me asking, slip me day-old pastries that were supposed to be thrown away, and listen to my crazy ideas about revolutionizing supply chain management like they were poetry instead of the desperate schemes of a guy trying to climb out of poverty. When her shift ended, she'd sit across from me in that coffee shop, her chin resting on her hands, her eyes bright with what I thought was genuine interest in my dreams. "You're going to build something incredible, Michael," she'd tell me, and those words were like oxygen to a drowning man. "I can see it in your eyes. You have this fire that most people don't have. You're not just trying to get rich, you're trying to solve real problems for real people." Those conversations led to late-night walks through our neighborhood, past the abandoned storefronts and the broken streetlights, talking about the future we were going to build together. She would paint these vivid pictures of the house we'd buy, the trips we'd take, the family we'd start once the business took off. She made poverty feel temporary, like we were just actors playing poor people in a movie that would have a happy ending. Within 6 months, we were living together in a one-bedroom apartment that was generous enough to call a shoebox. The walls were so thin we knew our neighbors' daily schedules better than our own. The heating barely worked, the plumbing was a daily adventure, and the kitchen was so small that only one person could cook at a time. But when Sarah would curl up next to me on our second-hand couch, her head on my shoulder, talking about our plans for the future, it felt like we were living in a mansion. "I don't need fancy things," she'd whisper while we shared our dinner of 99-cent ramen noodles for the 4th night in a row. "I just need you. I need us. As long as we're building this together, I can handle anything." If you're already feeling the chills from where this is heading, make sure you're subscribed, because the betrayal that's coming will leave you speechless, and the revenge that follows will restore your faith in justice. I believed every word she said because I wanted to believe it, because I needed to believe it, because those words were the fuel that kept me going when everything else said I should quit. I was working 3 jobs just to keep us afloat. Mornings at the warehouse, afternoons delivering pizzas to college kids who tipped in loose change, and weekends cleaning office buildings where I'd empty the trash cans of people who made more in a month than I made in a year. But every spare moment, every ounce of energy I had left, went into developing my business idea. Supply chain optimization for small and medium businesses. I know it doesn't sound sexy, but I could see something that nobody else could see. Small companies were hemorrhaging money on inefficient logistics, bad routing decisions, and inventory management systems that belonged in the Stone Age. They needed someone who understood their pain because he'd lived it, someone who'd worked in warehouses and delivery trucks and knew exactly where the problems were hiding. Sarah would watch me hunched over my laptop at our kitchen table, surrounded by empty energy drink cans and notebooks filled with algorithms and flow charts. She'd bring me coffee and rub my shoulders and tell me how proud she was of my dedication. But looking back now, I can see something in her eyes that I was too blind to recognize then. It wasn't admiration for my work ethic. It wasn't excitement about our shared future. It was impatience. She was watching me like someone watches a stock they've invested in, wondering when it was finally going to pay dividends. The signs were all there, but love makes you stupid and desperation makes you deaf. When I talk about a breakthrough in my code, her eyes would glaze over and she'd change the subject to something more immediate, more practical. When I'd get excited about a potential client meeting, she'd ask how much money they might bring in rather than celebrating the validation of my ideas. When I'd work late into the night because inspiration struck, she'd complain about being lonely instead of understanding that I was building our future one sleepless hour at a time. The first year of trying to build my business was like trying to climb a mountain during an avalanche. Every step forward was followed by 2 steps back. I managed to land a few small clients, mom-and-pop shops who were desperate enough to take a chance on a guy working out of his apartment, but the money barely covered our rent, let alone allowed me to grow the business or hire help. Sarah had to pick up extra shifts at the coffee shop, and I could feel the resentment building between us like pressure in a steam boiler. Our conversations became shorter, our silences became longer, and our dreams started feeling more like fantasies we'd been foolish enough to believe. "When is this going to start working?" she'd ask during our increasingly frequent arguments. "My friends are getting engaged, buying houses, starting their careers. What are we doing, Michael? When does this stop being a hobby and start being a real business?" Those questions felt like knives twisting in wounds that were already infected with my own self-doubt. Was I deluding myself? Was I chasing an impossible dream while Sarah sacrificed her own happiness for my stubborn refusal to accept reality? Was I being selfish by asking her to believe in something that might never work? But I couldn't quit because I could see something she couldn't see. I could see the market gap that was begging to be filled, the solution that could save companies millions of dollars while making our fortune. Every rejection letter, every failed pitch meeting, every client who chose a bigger firm over my apartment-based operation was just data points leading me closer to the breakthrough I knew was coming. Year 2 was when I started to crack the code. I had refined my software to the point where it could analyze a company's entire supply chain and identify inefficiencies that were costing them hundreds of thousands of dollars annually. I had testimonials from my small clients showing cost savings of 20 to 30% within months of implementation. I had a product that worked, a track record that proved it, and a growing reputation in the industry as someone who could deliver results. But Sarah wasn't celebrating these small victories with me. She was becoming more distant, more critical, more focused on what we didn't have rather than what we were building. She'd scroll through social media showing me pictures of her friends' engagement rings and new cars and vacation photos, like evidence in a case against the choices we'd made together. "Look at Jessica's new apartment," she'd say, shoving her phone in my face. "Look at the kitchen island, the granite countertops, the walk-in closet. Her boyfriend works in sales for his dad's company. He doesn't work weekends, he doesn't stay up all night coding, and he can afford to take her out to dinner somewhere nicer than the food court at the mall." Those comparisons were eating away at the foundation of our relationship, but I thought they were just growing pains, temporary frustrations that would disappear once the business really took off. I thought Sarah was just scared, just tired of the uncertainty, just needing reassurance that our sacrifices would eventually pay off. I had no idea that she wasn't just comparing our life to her friends' lives. She was calculating the cost of staying versus the benefit of leaving, weighing her options like a day trader deciding when to sell stock. While I was falling asleep at my laptop, coding solutions to problems that could change entire industries, she was researching divorce lawyers and asset division laws. Year 3 was when everything changed, but not in the way I expected. I had caught the attention of Marcus Chin, the CEO of a mid-sized manufacturing company that was struggling with supply chain inefficiencies that were costing them millions annually. Marcus had heard about my software through industry connections and wanted to see a demonstration of what I could do for his operation. The meeting was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in downtown, and I remember everything about that day with crystal clarity. I put on my only decent suit, the one Sarah's friend had altered for me after I bought it from a thrift store. The jacket was slightly too big and the pants were a touch too short, but it was all I had. I practiced my presentation until I could recite it backwards, prepared answers for every possible question, and printed copies of my proposal on paper that cost more per page than we usually spent on breakfast. Sarah barely looked up from her phone when I kissed her goodbye that morning. "Good luck," she mumbled, not even making eye contact. If I had known that was the last normal conversation we'd ever have, if I had known what she was planning while I was fighting for our future, I might have paid more attention to the coldness in her voice. The presentation went better than I had dared to hope. Marcus and his team were engaged from the first slide, asking intelligent questions, nodding at the right moments, leaning forward when I showed them the projected cost savings. When I demonstrated how my software could reduce their logistics expenses by 37% within the first year, I saw something in Marcus's eyes that I'd never seen before in a potential client. Genuine excitement mixed with the kind of respect you give someone who's just solved a problem you thought was unsolvable. "Michael," Marcus said, leaning back in his leather chair, "what you've built here isn't just a software solution. It's a revolution. How soon can you implement this for our entire operation?" My heart was pounding so hard I was sure everyone in the room could hear it. This was the moment I'd been working toward for 3 years of 16-hour days and ramen noodle dinners and arguments about when our dreams would become reality. "I can have a pilot program running within 2 weeks," I managed to say, trying to keep my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. "Full implementation within 60 days. The contract they offered me was more money than I'd seen in my entire life combined. 6 figures for the initial implementation, plus ongoing support fees that would triple my annual income overnight. I signed those papers with hands that were literally shaking with excitement and relief and the overwhelming realization that we'd finally made it. I couldn't wait to get home to Sarah. I couldn't wait to see her face when I told her that all the sacrifices and struggles and late nights had finally paid off, that we could finally start living the life we'd been planning for so long. I stopped at the grocery store and bought a bottle of champagne that cost more than our weekly food budget. I was going to cook her favorite meal, pop that cork, and celebrate the beginning of our new life together. But when I opened the door to our apartment, Sarah was sitting at our kitchen table with an expression I'd never seen before. It wasn't curiosity about why I was home early with expensive champagne and a grin that probably looked manic. It wasn't excitement about the potential good news I might be bringing home. It was something cold and calculated and final that made my stomach drop like I just stepped off a cliff. "We need to talk," she said, and those 4 words hit me like a physical blow. There's a reason people say nothing good ever follows those words, but I never understood the truth of that statement until it was my turn to hear them. I set down the champagne and groceries, my mind scrambling to process what was happening. The excitement from the meeting was still flooding my system, making it hard to shift gears into whatever serious conversation she apparently needed to have. "Sarah, what's wrong?" "I have incredible news. The meeting with Marcus went even better than I hoped, and I want a divorce." The words hung in the air between us like smoke from a fire, acrid and suffocating. I actually laughed at first because my brain couldn't process what she'd just said. It was like she'd spoken in a foreign language and I was still trying to translate. "What are you talking about? Sarah, this is insane. We just had the breakthrough we've been waiting for. Everything is about to change for us." She stood up from the table, and that's when I noticed the manila folder that had been sitting in front of her. Divorce papers. She had already seen a lawyer. She had already made her decision. While I was killing myself to build our future, she was planning her exit strategy. "I'm not happy, Michael. I haven't been happy for a long time. You've been so obsessed with this business that you've forgotten about us, about me. I need more than promises and dreams. I need stability, security, a real life." The irony was suffocating. After 3 years of instability, after 3 years of her complaining about our financial situation, after 3 years of me working myself to the bone to give her the security she claimed to want, she was leaving me just as I was about to deliver everything she'd asked for. Hit that like button right now if you can feel the betrayal burning in your chest, because what I discovered next about her real timeline will make your blood boil with rage. But here's where this story takes a turn that still makes my blood pressure spike every time I think about it. Over the next few weeks, as the divorce proceedings began, I started to piece together the real timeline of Sarah's decision. It wasn't a sudden realization that she was unhappy. It wasn't a spur-of-the-moment choice made in frustration about our financial struggles. She had been planning this for months. Her best friend Jennifer let it slip during a particularly uncomfortable encounter at the grocery store 2 weeks after I'd been served with papers. Jennifer was clearly drunk and apparently feeling guilty about something she'd been keeping secret. "I'm so sorry, Michael," she slurred while I was trying to buy enough food for 1 person instead of 2 for the first time in 4 years. Sarah made me promise not to tell you, but she's been talking about this since before Christmas. She's been meeting with lawyers, calculating assets, planning everything. Christmas. That was 8 months before the Marcus deal. 8 months before my business finally took off. 8 months before I had any significant assets for her to claim. She hadn't been waiting for me to succeed so she could leave me. She had been waiting for me to succeed so she could maximize what she could take when she left. Jennifer's drunken confession opened floodgates of revelations that painted a picture of betrayal so complete, so calculated, so thoroughly evil that I actually felt a strange sense of relief. This wasn't about love gone wrong or a relationship that had simply run its course. This was about a predator who had identified a target and executed a long-term plan to exploit and profit from their victim. Sarah hadn't just been planning the divorce for months. She had been actively sabotaging my business relationships and spreading rumors about my financial instability to mutual friends and professional contacts. Remember that potential client who backed out of a deal at the last minute without explanation? Sarah had reached out to his wife at a social function and casually mentioned how unstable and obsessed I was, how I was neglecting my family responsibilities for an unrealistic business venture that was probably going to fail anyway. Remember the investor meeting that got mysteriously canceled? Sarah had called their office pretending to be concerned about my mental health and business practices, suggesting they might want to do more research before getting involved with someone so unpredictable and unreliable. She wasn't just passively waiting for my success so she could claim her share. She was actively working against me, hedging her bets, making sure that if my business failed, she could claim it was because I was incompetent and irresponsible, and if it succeeded, she could claim she deserved credit for supporting me through the difficult times. The divorce proceedings became a masterclass in legal manipulation. Sarah's lawyer was a shark in an expensive suit who treated our divorce like a hostile corporate takeover. They wanted half of everything, half of my business, half of the Marcus contract, half of my software patents, half of the savings account that had exactly $437 in it, even half of the furniture in our rented apartment. Your client contributed to the household expenses and provided emotional support during the development phase of Mr. Michael's business. Her lawyer argued in mediation with the kind of confidence that only comes from years of practice at legal theft. She is entitled to compensation for her investment in his success. Investment. That word made me want to flip the conference table. What investment? The investment of complaining about our financial situation every chance she got? The investment of checking out emotionally while I worked 18-hour days? The investment of planning her exit strategy while I was planning our future together? But the worst part wasn't the money they were trying to steal. The worst part was how Sarah acted throughout the entire process. She was cold, businesslike, treating the dissolution of our 4-year relationship like a real estate transaction. There were no tears, no regrets, no acknowledgement of what we'd meant to each other, or at least what I thought we'd meant to each other. During one particularly brutal mediation session, I watched Sarah take notes while her lawyer listed all the assets they wanted to claim, occasionally nodding or whispering suggestions like she was at a business meeting instead of destroying the life we'd built together. When I tried to make eye contact with her, to find some trace of the woman who used to curl up next to me and talk about our dreams, she looked right through me like I was a stranger whose only relevance was the size of his bank account. The business I'd built was hemorrhaging money on legal fees. Marcus's company was getting impatient with the delays and complications. My focus was split between trying to implement their system and fighting for the right to keep what I'd created with my own hands and brain and years of sacrifice. I was sleeping 3 hours a night, living on energy drinks and pure adrenaline, watching everything I'd worked for potentially slip away because of a woman who had been playing a long con since the day we met. My friends and family tried to be supportive, but they didn't really understand what was happening. Just give her what she wants and move on, my brother kept saying. It's not worth the stress. You can always build another business. But they didn't get it. This wasn't just about money or assets or even the business itself. This was about justice, about fairness, about the principle that you can't just wait for someone else to build something and then claim credit for their work. I started to doubt everything about myself. Maybe I was the problem. Maybe I had been too focused on work. Maybe Sarah was right that I'd neglected our relationship in pursuit of success. Maybe I deserved this betrayal because I'd been a bad partner who prioritized building our future over enjoying our present. But then something happened that changed my entire perspective and gave me the clarity I needed to turn this nightmare into the most satisfying victory of my life. 3 months into the divorce proceedings, I got a phone call that would reshape everything I thought I knew about the situation. Jennifer called me again, but this time she was sober, deliberate, and apparently unable to live with the guilt of what she knew. "Michael, I need to tell you something, and I should have told you months ago," she said without any of the usual small talk that precedes difficult conversations. "What Sarah did to you isn't just wrong, it's evil, and I can't keep pretending I don't know the whole truth." What Jennifer told me next didn't just explain Sarah's behavior. It revealed a level of premeditation and manipulation that would have impressed a con artist. Sarah hadn't just been planning to leave me for months. She had been studying me, analyzing my weaknesses, calculating the optimal timing for maximum financial gain while minimizing her own risk and effort. She had been keeping detailed records of my work hours, my business expenses, my client interactions, building a case that she could present to a divorce lawyer about her contributions to my success. She had been documenting every late night I worked, every social event we missed because of my business commitments, every argument we had about money, creating a narrative that painted her as the long-suffering supportive partner who had sacrificed her own happiness for my selfish ambitions. But the most damaging revelation was about her sabotage campaign. It wasn't random or impulsive. She had systematically identified my most promising business relationships and destroyed them with surgical precision. She knew exactly what to say to each person to plant seeds of doubt about my reliability and professionalism. She had been playing both sides, supporting me to my face while undermining me behind my back, ensuring that she could control the timing of my success to maximize her payout. Jennifer showed me text messages between her and Sarah that read like strategy sessions for corporate espionage. Messages about which of my business contacts might be susceptible to rumors about my instability. Discussions about the optimal time to file for divorce to maximize asset claims while minimizing the risk that I might succeed enough to hide money or assets from her. The betrayal was so complete, so calculated, so thoroughly sociopathic that I felt something shift inside me. The hurt and confusion and self-doubt evaporated, replaced by a crystal-clear understanding of exactly what I was dealing with and exactly how I was going to respond. If you're feeling that fire in your chest right now, that burning need for justice, smash that subscribe button because the revenge I'm about to describe will satisfy every ounce of anger you're feeling on my behalf. Sarah wanted to play games? She wanted to treat our relationship like a business transaction? She wanted to use manipulation and sabotage as her weapons? Fine. I would beat her at her own game, but I would do it with a level of strategic thinking that would make her look like an amateur. I stopped fighting the divorce. I stopped arguing about assets and settlements. I stopped trying to protect my business from her claims. Instead, I did something that confused everyone involved in the case, including my own lawyer. I agreed to give her exactly what she wanted. "Michael, are you having a breakdown?" my lawyer asked when I told him to accept all of Sarah's demands. "You're giving her significantly more than any judge would likely award. You're essentially handing over half of your life's work." But I wasn't handing over my life's work. I was handing over the starting point, the foundation, the first chapter of what was going to become a much larger story. See, Sarah and her lawyer made one critical mistake in their calculations. They were thinking like people who had never built anything themselves, people who saw assets as static objects to be divided rather than dynamic tools to be leveraged. They wanted half of my business? Perfect. They could have half of the current contracts, half of the existing client relationships, half of the software licenses and intellectual property as it existed on the day the divorce was finalized. What they couldn't take was my brain, my experience, my relationships with suppliers and developers, my understanding of the market, and most importantly, my freedom to start over without their dead weight dragging me down. I signed those divorce papers with a smile on my face that probably made Sarah's lawyer think I was having a mental breakdown. But I wasn't breaking down. I was breaking free from a toxic situation that had been holding me back more than I'd realized, and I was about to prove that the real value in our relationship had never been the assets we'd accumulated. It had been me. The day the divorce was finalized, instead of wallowing in self-pity or anger, I threw a party. Not a celebration of my divorce, but a celebration of my independence, my clarity, my newfound ability to build something without compromise or sabotage or the constant energy drain of someone who didn't believe in my vision. That party was where I met Tom Rodriguez, a venture capitalist who had heard about my logistics optimization software through industry connections. Tom was intrigued by my approach to the divorce settlement, seeing it as evidence of strategic thinking rather than defeat. Most entrepreneurs I meet are so emotionally attached to their first success that they can't see the bigger picture. Tom told me over drinks that cost more than Sarah and I used to spend on groceries in a week. "You just proved that you understand the difference between tactics and strategy, between winning a battle and winning a war." Tom introduced me to a network of business owners who were facing the same supply chain challenges I'd solved for Marcus's company, but on a much larger scale. These weren't small manufacturing firms looking to save a few $1,000s on shipping costs. These were multi-million-dollar operations that could benefit from comprehensive logistics overhaul, companies that could afford to pay premium prices for premium solutions. Within 6 months of my divorce being finalized, I had signed contracts worth more than 10 times what Sarah had taken in the settlement. But more importantly, I had built a team of people who believed in the vision, who were excited about the possibilities, who saw the work as an opportunity rather than a burden. I hired Maria Santos as my business development director, a brilliant woman who had been frustrated in her previous job at a stagnant consulting firm. I brought on David Kim as my head of software development, a coding genius who shared my passion for revolutionizing how businesses handle their supply chains. I partnered with Lisa Chen, Marcus's sister, who had connections throughout the manufacturing industry and understood the pain points better than anyone. This was what a real team looked like. People who showed up early and stayed late not because they had to, but because they were excited about what we were building together. People who brought solutions instead of complaints, who saw challenges as opportunities rather than obstacles. People who celebrated each other's successes instead of calculating how much credit they could claim. The new company, which I called Meridian Logistics, grew faster than I had ever imagined possible. Without the constant stress and negativity of a failing relationship, without the energy drain of someone who questioned every decision and criticized every late night, I was operating at a level I didn't even know was possible. Within 18 months, Meridian Logistics had clients in 12 states and was generating revenue that made my original business look like a lemonade stand. We had developed proprietary algorithms that could reduce logistics costs by up to 50% for large-scale operations. We had a waiting list of potential clients and investors calling us instead of the other way around. But here's where the story gets really satisfying. Remember how Sarah had sabotaged some of my early business relationships? Well, some of those same people started reaching out when they heard about Meridian's success. They wanted to apologize for their earlier skepticism, to explain that they'd received some concerning information about working with me, and to explore potential partnerships now that my reputation had been vindicated. I was gracious in accepting their apologies, professional in discussing potential collaborations, but I never forgot who had stood by me during the difficult times and who had been swayed by lies and manipulation. Loyalty, I learned, is revealed not during success but during struggle, and I made sure to prioritize relationships with people who had demonstrated genuine character. The financial success was gratifying, but the personal growth was life-changing. I was no longer the desperate, struggling entrepreneur willing to accept scraps of support from someone who didn't believe in my potential. I was a confident business leader who attracted people who shared my ambition and values, who wanted to build something meaningful rather than just extract value from someone else's efforts. 2 years after our divorce was finalized, I received a text message that I'd been unconsciously waiting for, though I didn't realize it at the time. Sarah's name popped up on my phone screen, and for just a moment, I felt that old familiar flutter of anxiety that had characterized our entire relationship. "Can we talk? I made a mistake." That was it. 5 words that represented her attempt to undo 2 years of consequences, to somehow reset the clock and pretend that her betrayal and manipulation hadn't revealed her true character. 5 words that showed she still didn't understand what she had actually lost when she decided to treat our relationship like a business transaction. I was sitting in my new office when I got that message, a corner suite in a downtown high-rise with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. The contrast between where I was sitting and that cramped apartment where Sarah had handed me divorce papers was almost surreal. Meridian Logistics now employed 47 people across 3 offices. We have been featured in industry publications as one of the fastest-growing supply chain optimization companies in the country. I had been invited to speak at conferences, serve on advisory boards, and mentor young entrepreneurs who were facing the same challenges I'd overcome. But more importantly, I had found genuine happiness in both my professional and personal life. I was dating Elena, a pediatric surgeon who understood the demands of building something meaningful, who celebrated my successes instead of resenting them, who brought her own ambitions and achievements to our relationship rather than trying to claim credit for mine. Elena was everything Sarah had pretended to be during our early days together. She was genuinely supportive, intellectually curious about my work, emotionally stable, and most importantly, she was building her own legacy rather than waiting for someone else to create wealth she could claim. After letting Sarah's message sit unanswered for 3 days, I finally replied with a simple response: "I'm not interested in revisiting the past." But Sarah wasn't ready to accept that answer. Over the next several weeks, I received a series of increasingly desperate messages, phone calls, and she even showed up at my office building, trying to recreate the familiarity and intimacy we'd once shared. Please hit that like button if you're ready for the most satisfying confrontation you've ever witnessed, because what happens next will give you chills of pure justice. The final confrontation happened on a Thursday evening in December. I was leaving the office after a particularly productive day. We had just signed a contract with a major automotive manufacturer that would double our annual revenue, when I found Sarah waiting by my car in the parking garage. She looked different than I remembered. The confident, calculating woman who had sat across from me at mediation sessions was gone, replaced by someone who seemed smaller, more desperate, less sure of herself. The expensive clothes and jewelry she'd bought with her divorce settlement couldn't hide the fact that she was struggling with something deeper than financial concerns. "Michael, please just give me 5 minutes," she said as I approached my car. "I know I hurt you, but I was scared. I was young and stupid, and I made the biggest mistake of my life. I could have been cruel. I could have listed all the ways she had betrayed me, sabotaged me, treated me like an asset to be exploited rather than a partner to be supported. I could have detailed how much better my life had become without her toxicity and manipulation. I could have contrasted her desperation with Elena's genuine love and support. But I didn't need to be cruel because the truth was cruel enough. Sarah had gambled everything on a short-term strategy that prioritized immediate gain over long-term partnership. She had won the battle by taking half of what I'd built, but she had lost the war by losing access to the person who could build infinitely more. "Sarah," I said, keeping my voice calm and steady, "you didn't make a mistake. You made a choice. You chose to see our relationship as a transaction rather than a partnership. You chose to plan your exit instead of planning our future. You chose to take half of something small instead of building something great together." She started to cry, and for a moment I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I remembered all the nights she'd been cold and distant while I worked to build our future. I remembered the sabotage, the manipulation, the calculated cruelty of her timing. I remembered the relief I'd felt when I realized I was finally free to build something without her negativity dragging me down. "The money you took in the divorce," I continued, "that was never the real value in our relationship. The real value was the partnership, the shared vision, the commitment to building something together through good times and bad. You sold that for a percentage of one contract, not realizing that the real wealth was in the relationship itself." I got in my car and drove away, leaving her standing in that parking garage. It wasn't cruel and it wasn't vindictive. It was simply the closing of a chapter that had already ended 2 years earlier when she chose money over love, security over partnership, taking over building. The ultimate revenge wasn't anything I did to her. The ultimate revenge was the life I built without her, the success I achieved when I was no longer carrying the weight of her doubt and negativity, the happiness I found with someone who saw our relationship as an opportunity to build something great together rather than an asset to be claimed. Sarah got exactly what she asked for in the divorce, half of what I had built up to that point. But what she didn't understand was that she had also given up her claim to everything I would build afterward, and that turned out to be infinitely more valuable than what she had taken. 6 months after that parking garage confrontation, Elena and I got engaged. Not because we needed the legal security or social validation, but because we had found in each other the kind of partnership that Sarah and I had never really had. Elena proposed to me, actually, during a weekend trip to the mountains where we'd gone to celebrate Meridian's expansion into international markets. "I want to build a life with you," she said, getting down on one knee with a ring she'd designed herself. "Not because of what you've accomplished, but because of who you are and who we can become together." That proposal, in front of a sunrise that painted the mountains in shades of gold and crimson, was everything my relationship with Sarah had never been. It was based on genuine love and mutual respect rather than calculation and opportunism. It was a beginning rather than an ending, a foundation for building something together rather than a strategy for extracting maximum value from someone else's work. 1 year later, I received an invitation that I almost threw away without opening. It was Sarah's wedding invitation. She had married a guy named Brad who worked in middle management at an insurance company, someone safe and predictable who could provide the stability she'd always claimed to want. The invitation was expensive, elegant, clearly designed to project success and happiness. But I knew better. I knew that Brad's predictable salary would never grow beyond cost of living adjustments and annual bonuses tied to company performance he couldn't control. I knew that the stability Sarah had chosen came with a ceiling, a limit to what they could ever achieve together because neither of them had the vision or courage to build something extraordinary. Elena and I didn't attend the wedding, but we did something that day that felt like the perfect conclusion to this chapter of my life. We closed on our new house, A custom-built home on 5 acres outside the city with a workshop where I could tinker with new business ideas and a garden where Elena could grow the herbs she used in her experimental cooking. The house cost more than what Sarah had taken in our divorce settlement, but more importantly, it represented something she could never understand. It wasn't just a display of wealth or success. It was a manifestation of what two people could build when they were truly committed to creating something together rather than protecting themselves from each other. As I'm telling you this story 3 years later, Meridian Logistics has been acquired by a Fortune 500 company for an amount that I can't legally disclose, but let's just say it's enough to ensure that Elena and I will never have to worry about money again. But the acquisition wasn't the end goal. It was just another beginning, another opportunity to build something even bigger and more meaningful. I've started a new venture capital firm that specializes in supporting entrepreneurs who are building their first businesses, especially those who are facing the kind of struggles I went through during those early years with Sarah. I know what it's like to have your vision questioned by the people closest to you. I know what it's like to sacrifice everything for a dream that nobody else can see. I know what it's like to have someone you trust try to sabotage your success for their own gain. Every entrepreneur I invest in gets more than just money. They get someone who understands the journey, someone who believes in their potential even when their own families think they're crazy, someone who knows that the greatest businesses are built by people who refuse to accept limitations imposed by others. Elena and I got married in a ceremony that was the opposite of everything Sarah would have wanted. No expensive venue, no designer dress, no social media photo opportunities. Just our closest friends and family in Elena's parents' backyard, celebrating the beginning of a partnership built on mutual respect and shared ambition rather than financial calculation and social positioning. During my wedding speech, I looked out at the faces of people who had supported me through both the darkest and brightest moments of my journey, and I realized that Sarah had actually done me the greatest favor of my life. By showing me her true character, by forcing me to rebuild from scratch, by removing herself from my future, she had given me the opportunity to discover what I was truly capable of when I wasn't carrying the weight of someone else's doubt and manipulation. But here's the most satisfying part of this entire story, the detail that still makes me smile every time I think about it. Last month, I got a LinkedIn message from Sarah. Not a personal message, but a professional networking request. She's working as a real estate agent now, struggling to make ends meet with Brad's insurance salary and her commission-based income. Her message was carefully crafted to sound casual and professional, asking if I might be interested in looking at some commercial properties for my ventures, mentioning that she specializes in working with successful entrepreneurs and understands their unique needs. I didn't respond to her message, but I did look at her LinkedIn profile out of curiosity. Her bio talked about her expertise in helping business owners find the perfect spaces for their growing companies, her commitment to understanding her clients' visions and supporting their success. It was like reading fiction written by someone who had never met the real Sarah Martinez. The woman who had sabotaged my business relationships was now trying to profit from other people's business success. The woman who had calculated the optimal timing to abandon our partnership was now marketing herself as someone who understood and supported entrepreneurial journeys. The woman who had chosen short-term gain over long-term building was now desperately trying to attach herself to other people's achievements. I realized that Sarah would probably spend the rest of her life doing exactly what she'd done to me, identifying people who were building something valuable and figuring out how to extract benefit from their work without contributing real value in return. She would always be a taker rather than a builder, a calculator rather than a creator, someone who measured relationships in terms of what she could get rather than what she could give. Meanwhile, Elena and I are building something that Sarah could never understand or appreciate. We're building a legacy based on genuine partnership, mutual support, and shared vision. We're creating value not just for ourselves but for the entrepreneurs we invest in, the employees who work for our companies, the communities where we do business. Elena is developing new surgical techniques that are saving children's lives while I'm funding technologies that are solving real problems for real people. We celebrate each other's successes without calculating what we can claim credit for. We support each other through challenges without keeping score of who's contributing more. We plan our future together without exit strategies or backup plans. If you've stayed with me through this entire story, if you felt every twist and betrayal and triumph along the way, then you understand why I'm sharing this with you. This isn't just a revenge story about a woman who chose money over love and lived to regret it. This is a story about the power of resilience, the importance of choosing the right partners in life and business, and the truth that sometimes the greatest gift someone can give you is showing you who they really are before it's too late to escape. Sarah thought she was smart by calculating the optimal time to cash out of our relationship. She thought she was protecting herself by planning her exit strategy while I was planning our future. She thought she was winning by taking half of what I'd built instead of committing to building something greater together. But in the end, she traded a partnership with someone who could create unlimited wealth for a settlement that represented the ceiling of what she would ever achieve. She traded a relationship with someone who saw challenges as opportunities for a marriage with someone who sees stability as the highest goal. She traded the possibility of building an extraordinary life for the guarantee of living an ordinary one. The ultimate revenge isn't that I succeeded despite her betrayal. The ultimate revenge is that I succeeded because of her betrayal, because being forced to rebuild without her showed me what I was truly capable of when I wasn't being held back by someone who didn't believe in my potential. Every time someone asks me about the secret to my success, I tell them the same thing. Surround yourself with people who want to build something great with you, not people who want to profit from what you build. Choose partners who celebrate your victories instead of calculating their share of the credit. Invest your time and energy in relationships with people who see your potential rather than people who see your assets. Sarah got exactly what she deserved, which was exactly what she asked for. She got half of something small instead of sharing in something unlimited. She got security instead of adventure, predictability instead of potential, a settlement instead of a partnership. And I got the greatest gift anyone could ever receive: the knowledge that I'm capable of building something extraordinary, the freedom to choose partners who share my vision instead of people who want to exploit my work, and the wisdom to recognize the difference between people who want to build a future with you and people who want to profit from the future you build. If this story has inspired you, if it's reminded you of your own worth and potential, if it's shown you the importance of choosing the right people to share your journey with, then please hit that like button and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Remember, your value isn't determined by people who choose to leave you. Your value is proven by what you build after they're gone. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. Sometimes the best revenge is simply living well, building something great, and proving that you were never the problem. You were just partnered with someone who couldn't see your value until it was too late to claim it.